I recently watched Hazbin Hotel. Here are some small thoughts and criticisms. The first thing to note is that the show was made by a girl and has an audience largely of girls, and it shows through perhaps the most in the art design and style. There are various tells, one of which is the abundance of bishonen or pretty boy type characters as leads. The main characters, especially Alistar, all have these sharp-chinned, Dorito-shaped faces reminiscent of shoujo manga characters. The main character, Charlie, does ironic musical numbers, which shows a fixation with Disney movies. But the other big tell is that the two female leads both have distinct styles of makeup. This is an attentiveness to detail that only a girl would care about. I mean, sure, Disney princesses all have makeup, and they were designed by men, but they all have the same standard makeup that basically passes for no makeup at all, not the different fashions the two have. Now, if I were to sum up the pilot in a sentence, I would say that it definitely hits you with a lot of flashy, interesting ideas, but lacks a bit of meat in terms of the story. The pilot being, well, a pilot is only a teaser meant to give us a feel for the show, and it earns its popularity by showcasing all the eye-grabbing things about it, which is largely aesthetic. The world, the art style, the characters, their personality, designs, the overall tone and humor of the series, and so on. It does it quite well, aside from a few weird moments, like when Angel Dust loses the drugs that he buys from a vending machine, he goes, "Oh no, my drugs. I bought drugs, by the way. This is how I refer to my drugs." While the premise, the starting point, is interesting, I just don't feel like we've been shown anything that really endures a show in the long run, which is solid writing. The story kind of hits a bump around the 2/3 mark, when things hit a low point. At this point you'd expect some kind of turnaround or uptick, and there is, it's just kind of weird. Immediately a new character named Alistar is introduced and he offers help and Charlie accepts and he fixes everything and kills the villain with little to no effort. We bounce back, but it all feels unearned. Alistar is overall a weird character. He definitely seems to have a lot of fangirls and popularity as eye candy, and the creator Vivzy Pop definitely seems to know this, which is why he's a main character, directly involved in running the hotel instead of some mysterious figure that appears every few episodes or something. If I'm not wrong, the rules of common sense writing dictates that you don't have a character so blatantly overpowered on the side of the heroes, because that would destroy all the tension in any conflict. At the very least, keeping him out of the story would get dumb after a while. That's really the whole problem here. There's more flash over substance. A cool character, but it doesn't fit into the story at all. We have a very interesting three-way dynamic between the wild Angel Dust on one hand, Charlie's naive optimism in him on the other hand, and then we have Vaggie who supports Charlie but mistrusts Angel Dust in the middle. That's cool, and I feel like these interactions could have been allowed to carry more weight to the pilot, instead of giving the ending to the cool, flashy radio demon guy. Now, I know this is just a pilot episode, and can't really tell us everything that a full series can. Hell, it's on YouTube, for free. All it really needs to do is gather attention, but still, I feel like what we do know is incredibly lacking. There's so many questions. When you die, you become a demon in hell. So how come some people are spiders and snakes? They dodge the question, but it's still hanging in the air. How can people in the afterlife die? What's the deal with Vaggie? I mean, if being good and well behaved sends you to heaven, wouldn't she have gone by now? She seems pretty well behaved. She even considers drinking a sin, which is surprisingly prudish for such a progressive show. Is she ever going to have some kind of backstory? That's what I mean when I say this series is unlikely to deliver or satisfy. What would more substance in this series mean? Well, okay, the overall theme of this series is redemption, so a pilot episode should focus a little more on that. Let's just cut Alistar out of the story for now and focus on the why and how of Angel Dust. Why did he join the hotel and how is he gonna work towards his goal? In a webcomic, more details are given, so we know there's some thought being put there. Let's compare this to another story about the afterlife, Yu Yu Hakusho, a classic shonen manga. In just the first chapter, we can already find some sort of formula for how a good redemption story starts. What does Yu Yu Hakusho chapter 1 have that Hazbin Hotel doesn't? I mean, the latter has so much more visual flair, cool character designs and voice acting, but why do I prefer one to the other? I would hazard a guess that one of the things that separates the two is that Yu Yu Hakusho hammers in the stakes a little harder. And Yu Yu Hakusho, we see that our main character, Yusuke, is offered a test to come back to life, and we see why he wants to do that. In Hazbin Hotel, we kind of see that there's a purge of some sort every year, and conveniently the clock just so happens to have reset at the start of the pilot. You'd think that maybe over the course of the series we would want to save Angel Dust from the purge, and the clock would keep ticking. But given that Hell has a stable news industry and an established mafia that's been going on for a while, it seems like there's probably means to escape it anyway. We're not really certain if he's affected at all. In Yu Yu Hakusho, Yusuke either dies or takes the test to get where he wants to go. In Hazbin Hotel, Angel Dust has to choose between doing everything like he'd normally do and choosing to embark on something that nobody even thinks will work in the first place. He better have a good reason for it. Which brings me to my next point, which is that there's no big turnaround where Angel Dust agrees to support this whole thing. You know, the premise of the show. In Yu Yu Hakusho, we see that Yusuke doesn't seem to care much for anybody and initially accepts his death. It's only when he realizes how much the people in his life cared for him that he agrees to try and come back. In Hazbin Hotel, Angel Dust doesn't care at all about the project and says he's only there for the free rent. In the mid-section of the pilot, the hotel seems to be a complete failure, and after an argument they all slink back to the hotel defeated. And it seems like he's staying out of complete inertia. I guess he's still there for the free rent. Once Alistar comes along, he's just hanging out like he belongs there. And the whole question of trying to redeem himself is forgotten. The series would have a lot more drive to it if Angel Dust found some kind of reason to support the hotel after not caring. To sum it all up, the characters aren't quite as endearing as they should be because they don't make any meaningful decisions. Charlie wants to run a hotel and sticks to it despite the ridicule, and that makes you care for her more than any song number does. Nobody else really chooses anything of importance. Veggie is just a sidekick. Alistar was bored, and Angel Dust, as it stands, is kind of a flat character. Even by the show's own standards, he's not a good person. But he's not even that much of a bad person either. Yusuke was a violent delinquent who beat people up, but we saw bits of someone who meant well ultimately. Angel Dust is a gay porn star named after a drug who kills cartoon eggs. From the audience and creator's perspective, let's be honest here, these aren't even considered immoral. The arc of the story should be pointing upwards, but for Vivzy Pop and our audience, there isn't really an up or down. Angel Dust is a worse character for it, because there's less effort put into showing why he should be worth caring about. If he had, say, maybe a good reason to try and go clean, then maybe him helping his friend might have posed a kind of meaningful conflict that endears him to the audience. He doesn't, or can't have the perfect means, but at heart we would see that he's a good person. The kind of guy that would deserve staying at the hotel. He would be predestined for salvation, so to speak. Now, I've been comparing two very different stories here, and I don't mean to say that any sort of redemptive story needs to copy Yu Yu Hakusho. I appreciate the sort of unpolished rawness that comes from amateur online stuff, like webcomics or a web series, but there's always a persistent problem with a lot of them that brings it all down, which is a lack of thinking with the end in mind. A fan is like, and in this case can be, an investor in a product. And my prediction is that this series would bring a lot of short-term enjoyment, but in the long run will fail to deliver, unless it's revamped as it stands. To say something more positive about Vivzy Pop, I would compare this to its less prominent spin-off, Hell of a Boss. In Hell of a Boss, the character designs have a lot less zazz and variety to them, and the premise isn't as grandiose and epic, but it actually works a lot better. Hazbin Hotel has problems with world building, but the premise of its spin-off allows you to ignore all of that. It's a much less ambitious, more comedy and character-centric show. And in the first episode, the main character actually makes a decision that resolves some tension. I can see why this series has a first episode already, and Hazbin Hotel doesn't. Hazbin Hotel is a story about redemption, and that means forgiving sinners of their sins. Vivzy Pop can only tell sinners that they have no sins to forgive in the first place. She can appropriate the symbol of hell, but she has no capacity to tell a story with it. It's best to stick with demons shooting holes in people's heads. And basically, all of this is to say...